Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Writing the Rapids, the show where I, Joe Bielecki, talk to a writer about writing very often. Those writers have been recommended to me by writers who have previously been on the show, or it's a Rejoinder episode, which this is. We're talking once again to Charlene Elsby, who has a PhD in philosophy from McMaster University and was recently a tenure-track professor. She is the author of Hexus from Clash Books in 2020, Affect, The Porcupine's Quill in 2020, Psychros, Clash Books 2021, Bedlam, Apocalypse Party 2023, The Devil Thinks I'm Pretty from Apocalypse Party also in 2023, and Violent Faculties from Clash Books earlier this year. We are talking about her new book, Red Flags, from House of Vlad Press. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you for money. Patreon.com/NoisemakerJoe. For just $2 a month, you can get these episodes about a day earlier than everybody else. Or you can toss me a one-time donation at paypal.me/noisemakerjoe. You can buy my book. It's called Tired. It's pretty good. Or for free, for barely any effort at all, you can tell a friend about us. You can social media post, repost, reblog, recommend, rate, like, subscribe, that whole sort of thing. I'd appreciate it. Now, without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Charlene. So Red Flags is interesting to me because it almost works as a kind of retrospective in that it contains not only new short stories but old out-of-print chapbooks going back over 20 years, with Dirt Wet with Blood. And that's fascinating to me, right? I mean, all writers have always been writing. I think that's the thing that I've learned. But, in terms of being published, a lot of the people I run into published their first book maybe 5 years ago, right? My first book came out 3 years ago, almost 4. So it's not like everybody I'm talking to is new or anything. But you have a storied career. So I'm really curious as to how you feel about your writing now and where you're at with writing now.
That is a good question. Do I say everything I feel and admit to that, or do I make something up that sounds nice? I mean, I think... All right. I have my own concept of where my writing has gone and been and where it's going. And right now, I feel I don't know, I feel like I'm getting a little more normal than I have been in the past. And it's I think with publishing and recognizing the fact that people are actually going to read these books, that it snuck into my head a little bit as I'm writing that there is going to be a predictable reaction amongst the reader, which I didn't have before. We have this fuck the reader attitude, right?
Yeah.
But what if they're sneaking in? And I didn't think that was happening to me, but I just finished a novel and I handed it off to my husband to read. And he's like, oh, wow, this is very comprehensible. And I'm like, no, it's strange and weird. And he's like, no, sorry, it's readable. And yeah, I think, maybe the voices are getting in.
That's interesting. So I kind of feel like I keep being driven to write more normally too. And, I don't have an audience the way that you have an audience, obviously. But I was talking to my wife about it and I was like, I don't think I have it in me to be as dark and terrible and transgressive as I maybe thought I was in college. Right? I mean, I write experimental poetry stuff, right? Writing in InDesign, all that sort of thing. But so I'm curious as to if you, I don't know, is your writing, because you say it's, maybe it's the voices, but it could just be that your writing is outstripping your conception of yourself. maybe?
I'll tell you what I'm worried about. I'm worried that I'm learning craft.
Mm.
And I think that's because I've been reading a lot more contemporary work as opposed to where I started, where I only read classics.
Mm.
Whereas there seems to be like a form of things that's out there, that's lurking, that appears to me as a threat. It's like, and if you're not careful, you might write like an MFA student and then, yes, become, you know, someone who fits in during the time, but might not have that eternal lasting oomph effect that I am into. But I am very excited because I think one of the next things is going to be much more strange and a return to this abstract intellectualism, the collaboration I did with Shane Jesse Christmas.
Oh, sure. Yeah, he'll push you out of the
Exactly.
out of the normal pretty quick.
So I think it's going to be okay in the end. But yeah, I do feel like maybe I should retreat into the woods and just read Shorin for a few months.
I understand that. That's interesting to me, and really not what I expected. I don't know. I don't know why I expected you to be like, yeah, I'm really sort of like figured out what it is I'm doing and I'm comfortable doing it. That's naive of me in hindsight. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's because I've been reading so much genre fiction lately that like there is this, if you're writing a bunch of fantasy novels or if you're writing a bunch of science fiction novels, like there is a very established form, and where the people who are considered great within those boundaries are the people who make the form like operate at its highest level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the more, I don't know, literary whatever type people are operating on the fringes in the Wild West, where it's like what is considered great is doing something wholly unexpected.
Right? I want to fuck the form. Like,
Right.
uh-huh. And I mean, I guess it's a good thing to know what the form is before you decide to
Mm-hmm.
just alliterate it. But I mean, I'm a strong believer in trying to form the habits that you want to have, be
Mm-hmm.
the kind of person you want to be. So by like exposing yourselves to the negative elements, you run the risk of, becoming the kind of person you don't want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you don't want to become a lawyer type, don't go to law school, or else you will end up becoming that kind of person.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like I have to curate my experiences a little better.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The other thing I think about a lot, and maybe this is something you're coming up against then too, is, me and my friends like to rage against people who call themselves avant-garde.
Yeah. Are
And
they transgressive avant-garde or just avant-garde?
I I really I lump the transgressive people in with the avant-garde people. I think that I don't know. There's a level of self-importance to some artists across medium that I don't think is realistic. But my sort of like firm perspective on avant-garde is, if you're going to be avant-garde throughout your career, your work must be like indistinguishable from itself, right? Because you can't constantly be at the forefront if you're doing the same thing as yourself. So you
Okay.
know what I
Okay.
mean, right? Because
Yes.
at some point,
You need a full transformation every time you produce something.
right? Because you know, oh man, I can't think of somebody. I don't know, like I don't know, Burroughs, you know, wrote in a way that people weren't writing, and then people started to write like that.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, Burroughs becomes normal. At some point, the beat road novel just becomes a genre. that sort of thing. And, like, I don't think there is any sort of like moral or artistic value or lack thereof to not being avant-garde the whole time, right? Like, you can just be yourself, and it turns out that that's new and different and exciting, and then other people realize that they're like that too, and then the vultures come in and realize that there's money to be made writing like that too, and you're just doing your thing. So, and at some point you're not avant-garde, you're just established. But I also sympathize with the people who constantly want to be outside of something. Yeah, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And there's this, tendency, like I don't want to be something I've done before, but I also, um, there's that concern. It's like people are there, people are reading, people are, expecting a thing from you. So am I going to alienate everybody who I've come to know over the years by doing something completely different? And, maybe some people will appreciate that. And I think they should. I don't think I can stop though, right? Like you don't want to become that person who just becomes a caricature of yourself and just keeps presenting the same thing over and over. It's like, hey, Burroughs, do the Burroughs thing,
Mm-hmm.
and watch him go.
Yeah, at some point Jeff Goldblum just plays Jeff Goldblum in his movies.
Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, and I mean, to the nth degree, Nicolas Cage. Which is funny because I think he's got more range. Um, yeah, so, you know, I think also with you, like you're clearly finding an audience, um, which is fantastic. Um, but yeah, I don't know. That pressure seems rough. Um,
Right? We should go to the woods.
yeah.
Just go straight to the woods and write the ideas as they come, and irrespective of any one remembered past or anticipated future. Just
Hmm.
like fuck both those timescales.
Yeah, I mean that's the Buddhist way. Just live in the now. Just do the thing. Chop wood, carry water. Um,
I could go for some wood chopping.
mm-hmm. Make a Instagram account of you chopping wood, and there's money in that. Um, there's a whole lot of people who really like watching people chop wood.
I
Um,
choose to do it. I would show them every day the different ways I'm chopping wood, how the wood turns out.
mm-hmm.
Maybe there are patterns in the wood.
Um, Horny Instagram people are so silly. And I can't escape it, no matter how I try to tailor the algorithm. Um,
There are just some things they want you to see, and it's not gonna.
yeah. Um, I do want to talk about the book. That
Oh
was
yeah,
that was a huge sidetrack. But I think you know, I think important things to consider for aspiring writers, and I think the audience too, right? I think the audience has a responsibility to not have so many expectations. I I think that the newer Star Wars movies were ruined by expectations. I think a lot of, I mean, that's the reason why George R. R. Martin's never going to release the last book of the Game of Thrones series, right? Because it's poisoned. There's nothing you can possibly do. Like, if anything, he's going to have it released after his death, so he doesn't have to deal with it.
I can picture that.
But yeah, I don't know. So within the red flags short stories, hold on, I got a cough. There's a lot of hay made about Whitefish for Luna, which was a good story.
Mm.
I love Dick That Won't Quit, though.
I love that too. It was the most fun
Yeah,
one for me.
it was a fun parody, satire. I don't know. I don't have an MFA. Um, but it reminded me of one of the short stories in Bedlam, and I guess it was because it was another phallus centric story. The
Yeah.
split dick. What's his name? Splits his dick on a Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love. We've talked probably every time about my discomfort with the way that I don't know. I got a lot of problems with masculinity and how dudes have ruined it for me. To the point where like I don't know, like agony, like it's like I agree with you that you've run into men like this. I believe it. That is like not my experience being a man, and it sucks. But Dick That Won't Quit is great because, like, I hate those types of men too. I do see those types of guys, frequently because of the news and social media and stuff. So,
Okay, so if maybe it's writing from the male perspective can allow you to differentiate yourself from the main character, whereas if I'm writing from a woman's perspective, it's just like the picture of the man can be generalized to all men. Is that the idea?
I think so. And I think some of your female characters, like
You overly
do generalize all men, to that. And like, we talk about logic and philosophy a lot. Like, and logically it makes sense, right? Like, based on their experiences and the experience of people they know and their socioeconomic background and stuff, like it totally makes sense that you would expect that to
right.
be the male condition.
It's still inductive reasoning, right? Like you
Mhm.
take a small sample set of the population and then you make a generalization based on that, which is, it's not a certain kind of reasoning like deductive logic is. Like there is always room for error in induction.
Yeah. And I've
But this
gotten.
guy,
Go ahead.
he's inspired by a guy that Lindsay Lerman sent me an article about. And no, she didn't send it to me. She posted it on Twitter and said Charlene Elsby could write a short story about this. And it was a guy who was electrocuting his penis to try to make it younger.
Mm.
And I was like, challenge accepted. Let's go. And I wrote him.
Yeah. And it was just so. I don't know. Like the absurdity of it felt so real. Because some of these guys are like cartoonish on purpose, but seem to think that it is the cartoonishness that they are embodying which makes them geniuses, which is amazing to me because that makes no sense. Yeah,
Like if you could just eliminate nuance from yourself and become a brand.
yeah. Yeah, that's what it is, right? Like it's just ugh. Especially I don't know, I'm to some extent a public person. I am, I suppose, some sort of brand, but like I don't have the energy to be a character.
I know.
And these guys are, I guess, doing that, but the characters are uninteresting and one-dimensional. And I guess maybe because, doing the Andy Kaufman thing really is exhausting and you only have, there's only so many people who have that kind of caloric intake, I guess. But I don't know. Ugh.
No, they think they're embodying an ideal. Like I think this is a sincere belief,
Yeah,
but it's just a way to live.
I agree with you. So I like that you made it funny.
I wanted to be funny. I am calling this book a comedy. I mean, in most of it.
Sure. And I mean, Whitefish for Luna, again, there's an element of the absurd to it.
Mhm.
I, you know, I don't, I guess it's kind of funny. There's an absurdity to it. It certainly didn't make me laugh. Um, but like, yeah, like, I don't know. Don't stand around near the liquefier is the same sort of thing as Dick That Won't Quit. That sort of
Yes.
like,
Anti-capitalist comedy.
yeah. I'm not going to let a sign tell me what to do. I'm important.
That's right.
God, yeah, it's great. So the other thing, and we briefly mentioned this beforehand, is Letters to Jenny just after she died is the first of the out of print chapbooks that exists within this book.
Yes. I made Brian put them in reverse chronological order so we could go from most recently written back to the beginning.
Yes, and I appreciate that because it helped me formulate the opening to the podcast, which is it's some good content there, baby. But Letters to Jenny was one of the materials that I read before our first conversation, and I don't remember how much about it we talked. Is that syntax
I don't know.
right?
It wasn't the topic of the episode, right? We were talking about Psychros.
Well, those full lengths are more broad in scope, but I, alluded to earlier, Psychros made me very uncomfortable, especially the bathroom scene in the Starbucks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. I think me working through that is also good content TM. And I think people should go back and listen to me be in a very different place with masculinity and having a really hard time with that book, with also a person who, I knew less well than I know you now, right? Like, so one of the things I talk to my friends about is, I do like a sort of transitive property thing automatically, where like, throughout the 2010s, unlearning all the bad isms as I was, getting the social left side of me to catch up with the sort of economic left side of me that really all it took was me in like ninth grade reading the Wikipedia page for communism to be like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I'm a leftist. This is great. But I'm also a white kid who grew up in the suburbs, so the other side of that coin needed time. So I do this transitive property thing sometimes, where I've learned through all that like men who write stories in which women die and violence happens to women must hate women. And so I read Psychros and I'm like, oh no, this woman is gonna just destroy me.
Let's delve into that. So I feel like there is, I've heard it a couple of times and it was leveled against Nick Cave. Like, you wrote something that contains violence against women and therefore must be a misogynist. And I am grappling with this because I've got new manuscripts with violence against women, whereas I'm just like, okay, that's just a thing that happens.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't want to be a misogynist, but I also don't want to pretend that this isn't a thing that happens.
Right.
And I feel like it's a weird criticism because like most of the true crime that we're exposed to, if I listen to podcasts and watch documentaries on TV, it's all violence against women.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one, I think the 2010s media analysis, media criticism, wasn't great. I think it was very 101 level. And I'm glad that I am seeing some, like, let's reconsider sort of things. I mean, I remember a lot of hay being made about Tolkien and, like, all the bad people are coming out of the West. Tolkien must be racist. All the dwarves, you know, the dwarven languages are Semitic based, so he must think the dwarves are just Jews. And, like, you know,
Oh, yeah. I've heard whispers of that. I mean, I'm not hard into the fantasy field, but
yeah,
yeah, the new thing where every variation of species is supposed to be based on actual ethnic differences and then value judgments to be inferred.
right. Yeah, and so, like, I feel like a lot of that Tolkien stuff has sort of been pushed aside. The his There's a letter that he wrote to, like, the German government during Nazi reign where they were like, "Hey, Lord of the Rings is great. However, we need to make sure that you're not Jewish. Are you Aryan?" And his response was like, "Well, I don't come from India, so I can't be Aryan, right, guys?" So people are like, "Oh, right, like he understands." I mean, I don't know, man. He was a British guy who was born in, like, the 1800s. He was probably kind of racist. We've gotten away from your book.
It has. We've been doing that recently over the past years.
I think my point was that rereading letters to Jenny, feeling more comfortable with, like, myself and kind of knowing you a little bit better it was less challenging for me for the person to be like, I fucked the neighbor, just to, like, see what it was like, just to, like, I don't know, see if I could get closer to you somehow. I was able to, like, be more compassionate toward the speaker in the piece and really be like, oh, there's, like, a desperation happening here that I really understand, that is not operating on, like, a level that people who aren't supremely grieving would ever operate on, sort of thing.
I love that. In these past few sentences, you have, like, degendered the experience and inferred a universal human experience that increases our empathetic relationship. You and I, my friend.
Yay.
Yay.
I'm growing as a person. It's great. Isn't
We're
literature
growing
wonderful? But yeah, so I don't know, that was nice. And then being able to go back in time again is great. And then gonna cough again. Hold on.
Yep.
Getting all the way to Dirt Wet with Blood and reading the introduction.
Yeah.
Again, work to, like, contextualize your entire output for me. And I mean, I want to be clear that, like, I've always loved your work, right? Which is why I keep having you back on the show when you know, you're putting out a new book every 6 weeks or whatever. But, like, there's an interesting thing. I know we, as, like, a reading society, one, don't understand the separating art from the artist sort of that theory. Like, we don't understand it and don't do it correctly. But I do find that, like, there, with writers who have robust Wikipedia pages, I can more easily choose to, like, contextualize the work within the person. And with the contemporary stuff, it's much harder, because I don't take what people say on social media very seriously.
A good idea.
And, you know, don't talk to a lot of people kind of outside of public, right? Like most of our conversations that have happened where people can't listen to them are like, is Tuesday good? No, Tuesday's not good. What about Thursday? Well, I can do Thursday at this time. Like that's largely the extent. Our relationship is largely in public. Aside from like the half an hour on either side of recordings where we talk.
Now that you mention it, everybody is watching us.
Yep. They're all watching and they're all judging.
They're all watching and judging. I feel a little too seen.
But yeah, so the other thing about Dirt Wet with Blood is, and I guess maybe this goes back to the very beginning, is that the you're doing so many different formal things. There's rhyming verse. It's stuff structured like plays. I'm curious. Well, and it also, I don't want to say implies. At some point you stopped writing and then started writing again under your own name, or I don't know if this is your government name or what, under this guise. So I'm curious kind of what made you do the full switch to prose.
Yeah, good question. So back in the day when I was doing Dirt Wet with Blood, I was just writing whatever form the people I admired were writing. And I was reading a lot of Strindberg plays and Ibsen. So I'm like, okay, I could do plays. Let's do plays. That'll be fun. Poems, lovely. Like those. Short stories, absolutely. Let's take them. I did everything. Everything was short. I actually wrote a novel and then I didn't publish it. And then I, published that chapbook that nobody ever read. And I started doing more philosophy, and then my work just kind of became all philosophy all the time. Until 2019. So I just, I started using philosophy as the thing that I was writing. And when I joined the English department again, then I thought, hey, what a great excuse to write novels. And then I did that. And I do have secret poems on my phone, but I have given up plays because, I don't know, I think it hit me how much human interaction it takes to make one of those come to life. I have come to prefer the solitary method of production, whereas plays necessarily imply that there are going to be people reading lines and other individuals involved and like performance. No, it's not for me. If I could write a play and have nothing to do with it, that would be great.
Yeah. I mean, there's plays in verse press. You could do one of those unperformable plays.
Yeah. I could do that. Would be fun.
But I do feel you. I get that. Okay. I don't know. I love that. That is very real to me. The sort of like being a mirror for your environment and what you're consuming at the time. There are times when I know there's certain genres of music I shouldn't listen to because it'll make me open up FL Studio again and like try to make that type of music. And like some of those things for a 32-year-old father are just not allowed. Should not be allowed.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry you have unfulfilled desires because of social expectations.
No, there. I was talking to Ira about this on Blue Sky. I have a couple handfuls of songs that I gotta be real close to someone, and they need to be real cool for me to tell them about. So I don't have unfulfilled desires. I have desires that were fulfilled, and a clear eye of adulthood.
And you just told everybody about them on the internet, and now we're developing expectations for when these will be released.
Well, now when the show gets famous, gets popular, people will like dig through Bandcamp to try to figure out, you know, where the decades old music album is, and
Okay. Yeah,
and
I've done that. I've gone through that process, like with Ira.
yeah, trying to
Find all
find his
this.
old band.
Yeah. It's like you gotta know to look for like neon lushel and stuff.
Hmm, that's fantastic. Well, all right. So I want one more word about red flags. Um,
Okay.
and where do I want to end with?
Yes, let's be very intentional.
Which will be difficult. Um,
Always.
oh, you know what I really like? We'll go back to the beginning. We'll go back to the short stories. I really like this um, technique you use of the introspection happening during times of great cataclysm.
Hmm.
Um, you know, again, Whitefish for Luna happens, but like also a little more spontaneous, kind of does that same thing. Um, and yeah, I just really love that sort of like I don't know. I guess it's a play on like your life flashing before your eyes, where like you're being scraped along the pavement, and so you think about a failed friendship or whatever. Um, but yeah, I'd like you to talk about that structure and why you gravitate toward it.
Mm. Okay. I think so. Some of that was inspired by just I read in one of these palliative care pamphlets not to expect people as they are dying to come up with anything profound about, life, the universe, and everything, that they're just going to, continue to be the person they always were and um, think the thoughts they have always had. So I got, at the moment of death, we just get stuck trying to feed the cat, right? Like, who's going to take care of this? And yeah, I thought I was, this failed friendship, it only comes into play because she comes up in this person's thoughts as someone who could have fed the cat ultimately. And yes, I do think it is funny. I laughed when I was writing it that we might get stuck on these trivial points when faced with, the grand concept of our own elimination from the universe. And I think that is kind of how we live our lives as well. Like, it is a matter of fact that death is constantly looming. So the fact that I am much too focused on answering this email in a timely period is a little laughable. Yeah, and something I did hear that I haven't much done before is try to take on other perspectives. Like, there are various characters in this book. I don't know if you noticed. And I did bring in the absurd. I was reading a lot of David Simmons and Grant Womack at the time. And I'm like, these guys are hilarious. I wish I were hilarious. I'm going to be hilarious. And then I wrote some stories. So yeah, I tried to bring in the absurdity where, big, effectual, profound things are happening, and we're talking about feeding the cat.